Happy to be here, also in presence. I've had the chance to come to the Art Summit for a couple of times, and it's so great to be physically here. So have you, Olaf? We have met on the campus several times. We're part of the same school, same university. You're working now in Geneva. So you have a background as a physician, as a neurologist, as a neuroscientist, and you lead the Laboratory of Cognitive Neuroscience, but also the Bertarelli Foundation Chair in Cognitive Neuroprosthetics. And I remember when you arrived on campus, he was the big star because he published something on the out-of-body experience. And I remember I was with Patrick and Michel, so he's coming, everybody was excited. So can you tell us a bit to start with, what is this out-of-body experience?
Well, now I'm really embarrassed to start, but I just want to say that the two speakers before are just incredible. I mean, I'm almost embarrassed to start talking about the brain and science and so on. So I'm a neuroscientist, and at the time, this is the early 2000s, I knew I wanted to work on consciousness, and I was working together with many of my patients together in Geneva at the time. And it was a chance observation, and somehow in that encounter, I felt like, yes, that's something I want to do for the next couple of years, because I felt there was something special. So out-of-body experience means somehow that consciousness can leave the body and come back. And I'm like, not possible, right? As a neurologist, as a scientist, clearly that's not possible. But of course, 5% of the general population will encounter such an experience. So many people in this room, I have never been so lucky to do so, can encounter this once in a life, that you seem to be outside your body, very often under the ceiling, and you're looking down and you see your body. And this is what happens. I have a tendency to walk, so that's why I'm the one with the mic here. So we were doing a medical examination. The chance observation was that each time we stimulated at those yellow electrodes, she had exactly that. She was kind of smiling, funny, and I see myself down there. I see all the 3 doctors around me. What's going on? Explain me. What are you doing to me? We're like, well, we didn't really know. We took notes and wrote it all down. But later on, looking this up, this got research going, because normally an out-of-body experience happens in there are several explanations and situations, but it has never been so mechanistic, if you want, because the stimulation was 2 seconds, and the out-of-body experience, so this dissociation of consciousness from the body, happened for 2 seconds, and then it went back, like a light switch, turning it on and off. And that was sort of, I'm like, I want to understand how this works, because I couldn't believe that could happen to me in a similar way. And of course, just this slide to say that there is a huge tradition, of course, what consciousness in itself, and how we have thought about it, a lot of philosophy, a lot of psychology. We're looking at a different, maybe the next slide already, we're looking at a different kind of self, because the slide before was really about what do I know about myself, my last visit to Verbier, what do I remember the last time I've seen Nicolas, what did I just eat for lunch, right? This is all part of the self, and the brain is, of course, important, remembering this. The out-of-body seems like something very different. In the meeting yesterday, we talked about the animal, sort of the animal consciousness becoming something more immediate, happening here and now. And with Marta, we talked together about her art in people with having phantom limbs following amputation, the loss of a limb, and she's doing amazing work in many Ukrainian heroes who have lost an arm. And the phantom limb means that there is a consciousness of the body. You're looking at me very, stop me if it's too long. So there is a consciousness of the body that persists. There is no more arm. If I would be the amputee, I know that there is no arm, but this somehow continues. It's a flesh-like sensation that the phantom, the arm is still there, my arm is still there, and it can even hurt. I think many of your subjects refer to this as well. Well, we think, and that's the model we still pursue today after this first chance observation, that an out-of-body experience is something like that this phantom body, we don't just have phantom limbs, we also have sort of this entire phantom body, ourself, somehow well located here and represented here, but during an out-of-body experience that quickly is somewhere else.
I think what is also interesting is you have this observation, but then it's also about inducing this spatial dissociation, because with VR and other stuff, you started also to do some experiment on this.
So the question is, how can we, if this is something that we all have, I guess we all have consciousness in this room, everybody has this bodily feeling of being somewhere around your body. So we used at the time, the headsets were a little bit bigger, but we used virtual reality and we developed a scenario. What happened if I see another copy of myself standing in front of me, not like in a mirror, but a little bit like René Magritte's Reproduction Interdite. I think so you see sort of a back view of yourself standing in front of you, and that's what we did here. And then if you could click to the next slide, and there's a few animations. So basically, what a subject is doing in the setup is wearing a head-mounted display. This is the person we're studying. We're trying to understand the consciousness of that person. There's a camera behind, and if you can click one time. So what the person sees is a second self, a virtual avatar. Nobody knew avatar 15 years ago what that's supposed to mean, so we called it virtual body avatar. So you see this body, and then if you click one more time, we apply the touch here. So you feel the touch, obviously, if I were in this experiment, at your back. But I see the second Olaf in front of me at this position, and I see the touch being applied here. And obviously, when I look down, all my touches are always where I see them. So there's one co-location. But what we did, we pulled them apart. And we were wondering what happened if we apply this stimulation, not with a paintbrush, but by a soft stick. If we apply this for 5 minutes, what happens? And what we could measure, actually subsequently in many, many studies, is that actually the brain starts representing two consciousnesses. So a lifelong experience can be overwritten if the brain is exposed to new situations. And VR, I think, is one of them. And obviously, just to tell you that we're also looking, of course, what's happening in those states, moving from one consciousness to an out-of-body consciousness, what happens in the brain. And it seems to be really a switch, a power that we all have that is possible. And yeah, I think what we recently have tried to, and so we're doing a lot of neuroscience on this, but how can we bring this back to other activities from culture about the mind, about consciousness, that have been around again for many years, and we have looked not very much in the West, but rather in Eastern traditions, and looked at meditation practices, certain contemplative practices, and how can we cultivate, so this approach of virtual reality and the self-split, how can we bring it together for certain kind of meditation practices? And this is a new kind of project that we have over several years now and continue over the next decade. How can we use these soft technologies like VR? AI may also be interesting to incorporate in this. And these are just several images that you see of the setup. So this is what it really looks like in the lab, a little bit messy, but still like the first talk, we also seem to have this dim illumination in the room, like you found. I'm not sure what our feedback on that was, but so this is basically a lab we created. We map the meditator, the contemplating consciousness, if you want, during the practice, and then we allow different exposures to different avatars. And if you can push one more time on the slide, we can of course take the person then out of a virtual lab representation. So there's a whole sequence of rooms. You start obviously in the physical room, there's a virtual representation of the room, and then there can be all sorts of rooms. You can be meditating. That's something that I, not because of narcissism, enjoy myself, to just meditate in the self-compassion meditation with yourself, with one avatar, with a different avatar. You can also be in a group, and this can all be incorporated and projected in this way. The importance here is that we take traditional forms of meditation, which many people actually give up because they are very motivated to learn how to meditate, to learn something about their consciousness, but they give up because everything is based on a lot of practice, following a certain tradition, a certain school. But the technology that I briefly presented here is very important to help support certain form of meditation, and that's where Nicolas has
and we had the chance to work together on how we can bring other type of stimuli here. And for instance, you had a project where you have pixel coming on the bottom of the feet with heat and pressure, and also the sound. And this create other conscious state of consciousness here. We continue so to work here with body feedback. So taking the signal, the breath, skin conductivity is something that you can see here at the back. And here it was really to trigger meditation, but based on Taoist. And we worked with really Taoist master. We sent our research assistant. I will just show you here a film. So it was re-implemented. The nice thing is that we work with new technologies. We work with contemporary design and art, and it was really fully implemented in the largest Taoist temple in Europe. And so here we, with the body signals, we trigger individual meditation with the light, different color of light, and pulse of light. But then we have also several stations, and with the sound, we're able to induce collective meditation. And that was quite fascinating to have this really accepted by the Taoists themselves in the temple, but also other people coming and meditating with them. You can see the movie here, the full movie. It's not very long at the back. And you can even, we made kind of a fake interaction because we can bring the full installation. It takes too long, but you can test the reaction of the visuals and how this art piece will really interact with your body to trigger meditation. So here, the role of art, we have just a few minutes left, but the role of art, I think, is critical here. The role of culture, the role of design. I like to bring, culture here, it's design and art together to see how we can, bring this different state of meditation. So here, for instance, we just started with our research assistant to make some experiment with you. For instance, this experiment that you have, how we can create new type of environment. I think this is.
Yes, so again, what kind of environments will be used in virtual reality, right? So this is obviously not something that I'm going to do together with my scientist friends. So we're going to work rather with, actually it's a very long ongoing story already, working directly with artists. This is just one very early example, but I think if you click one more time, the other examples we have, so we were very fortunate to have something like a collaboration that we talked about in the workshop also this morning. Several artists, this is Nicole Oettinger, a British-Swiss artist, she's based in Zurich. She's also involved in art therapy, and she has used, and after a year of exposure, and then she took this into her atelier, she took that setup that I presented very briefly, and she was interested how to do self-portraits in this setup. So you never see yourself, but you see yourself in this awkward position, being avatar, or where's your consciousness in this double consciousness out-of-body scenario, and drew several of these self-portraits. We don't have much time to go, so so that's one of the drawing sketches she did during that exposure. This is another work, so there was also Isabella Pasqualini, an Italian architect we've worked with, and going back to Bruce Naumann's work on video corridor installations. This is Mark Boulos, an American-Syrian installation artist, where we also worked over several years, and he brought, he found all the funding, and I was just advisor. He called it Echo, so he was very much interested also in bringing music to this Narcissus kind of theme and avatar exposure, and brought this to a projection of the avatar of the double consciousness to another location that you see on this video. And again, yes, the next slide. I don't know if there is. So we also had one collaboration, a final one with Daniel Bizik from where we also looked at video installations. I think what I just want to mention here as a last thing is this is not something where the artist comes and learns about the brain or we learn something. I think if something meaningful is going to come, you got to start from the beginning, collaboration, and develop a project that's benefiting both. Of course, it's trivial and it's not to say this here, but it's really hard work for both sides. And so it's very fortunate to work on these self-splits, just from my perspective, and consciousness, and how does somebody who's not constrained by visions from neuroscience, how does an artist think about this? And very different artists, of course, depending on their tool. So I think this is really something that should only increase, although to find the right ways to bring people to the lab and scientists to the studio I think is a huge long-standing work.
And it's really what happened here in this project. You have also, you can test it here at the back, is getting through also therapy, not only state of consciousness. And here we're working on new way to try to diminish the tinnitus. You know, tinnitus is affecting a lot of people. It's not produced by the ears, it's the sound of the ears. But it's not, in fact, produced by the ears, but by the brain. And here what we try to do is to have, with an EEG helmet, is to give a neurofeedback and try to train the brain, the region of the brain that produces tinnitus, to do something else and to play with the plasticity of the brain to have something which is permanent. But if you don't have something which is engaging, which is stimulating, which has a cultural dimension, I mean, nobody will interact with the machine on the long term, because you need to have several hours of training. So here, the artistic input is absolutely essential, and we had the chance to work with the Hospital of Zurich and the professor there since the beginning to see how we can bring AI to locate the region of the brain, the medical dimension, the artistic dimension, to start to find this new work. And the clinical trials are starting right now in the Hospital of Zurich. So I think this is quite interesting to see how we can have this new form of engagement without putting too constraints on the artist. So you can see here that's adapt, and you can test it here. Again, it's a fake, will not put you a full helmet. So perhaps I will finish on perhaps one thing, and that was also part of the discussion that we have, and it's just something we launch here and we propose, because we were speaking a lot about how we can create perhaps a better world involving the artist. I think bring this notion of critique is absolutely essential. The notion of emotion is essential, but I think art has in some way be a bit left over in all the innovation, in all the building of future. You have scientists, they work in, it's so hard to get your paper published and all this thing, that's very difficult to work together. So here we try to think how we can engage art in a new way. Often you have this artist residency, but it's very short time, it's not a lot of resources, it's either very constrained. So the idea was, and then we can discuss with some of the collectors here, the artists, is it the right, it should not be the only way. But it would be this notion of art reach transformation. And here the idea is, rather than for collectors or people interested in arts, rather than having one art piece which is finished, it's to engage at the beginning of the project where really an artwork will be involved in a new therapy or a new relation with the environment. And then we'll take out one art piece of this, a unique art piece, but the art is involved all along the project. It's not during 3 months as a residency, and we'll monitor also the impact since the beginning, see how we can learn about the impact, how it's perceived with people. So I think it could be a new way to engage and to have a platform, see how we can all work together to build a better world together. So that's just a proposition. We'll see if it's, so if you're an artist, if you're on all sides, you can come to me, we can discuss and have this discussion. And perhaps I will finish with Olaf, because you have involved almost since the beginning also artists in one way or another, you have been sensitive to this. So if I had, what would be your dream in the next few years, according to what you have done and what you have seen in terms of future?
Surprise question for me at the end. Yeah. So, yeah. Again, like what we were discussing, I think last night and this morning. I think so. We are very interested not only to work together with artists and work at this link. I think that hasn't been exploited enough between studio and lab. I think, but also to go outside the studio and outside the lab. And we talked about just Claudia's talk before about loss of biodiversity. We're losing also a diversity of languages. We're losing diversity of consciousness. So the meditation, mindfulness, and related self-compassion projects are also ways that we can use technology today and science to preserve some of this and to also expose other groups of people to this. Not having to travel, but there is a preservation and also an outlooking thing to take seriously, as I mentioned, language, but also conscious human experience. We're having a massive loss of this, and I think what I sketched too briefly would also be a way of creating not a museum, but creating spaces and interactive spaces with people in order to learn more about these experiences and eventually maybe have benefits for the art world, for science, and for humanity as a whole. But it would be a dream, and if the art festival here can play a role, I think it would be fantastic.
I was last week at the Centre Pompidou with the IRCAM, and also this center are very interested in this new approach. And so, because we need also to have visuals, we need to have sound, and we also need to explore other senses. I think this is also essential. So thank you, Angelique. Thank you, Philippe, because I think also we always had discussion which were very motivating, the art, but also how art can really impact society and our future. And I think there's still a lot of work to do. But thank you very much.